How can I tell if I'm actually being positive or just in denial? There's a lot of noise out there about toxic positivity, and you've probably heard it before, just think positive. And it's kind of annoying when you hear that because a lot of people don't even know what positivity actually is. I am a professional psychologist, and I've got some ideas to share with you today that will help you to get clear about positivity versus denial. I'll also give you 2 specific brain hacks that you can use immediately to make sure that you're on the positivity side. So let's get clear first about what positivity actually is. My job as a psychologist is to illuminate the obvious, which is really cool because I get paid to tell people things they already know. But there's a lot of things that are obvious once they're called to your attention and completely unnoticed up until that point. Like the feeling of your shirt. Oh, now you can feel it. Well, sure you can, because I called it to your attention. There's a lot of processes in our brain that are in that space. They're obvious once called to your attention, but completely unnoticed up until that point. Most people know that positivity has something to do with my thinking. But what a lot of people don't notice is that there are different aspects to our thinking. In fact, there are 2 processes that I will call to your attention. And I think you're going to see them immediately as I point them out. The first one is evaluation. Evaluation meaning judgment, and you can't turn it off. It's kind of like gravity. Do you ever get up in the morning and think, I wonder if gravity's on today? No. It's on, and it affects you all day long. What would happen if you were to jump from the top of a tall building or a cliff? You would fall. For sure or maybe? Sometimes or every time. You see how gravity is? Now, what if you're standing at the top of that tall building or cliff and you're thinking, yeah, gravity, whatever, I don't believe in that. And then you jump. Same splat as the believers. Gravity doesn't care if you believe in it or not. It's always on. And that's how these processes in our brain are. So notice this. You are constantly evaluating or judging everything, aren't you? Yeah, just notice it. You're judging yourself pretty harshly sometimes. You judge your family, your spouse, your kids. You judge your coworkers, your boss. You judge your clients and customers. You judge the people in your neighborhood, the people at your church, the people at your synagogue, the people in your community. You judge the weather, the government, the economy. You're judging me. It's cool, I'm judging you. See, we can't turn it off. We're constantly doing it. That's what I mean. Evaluation is a process that's going on in our mind all the time, and we can't turn it off. Now, before I share the other process with you, notice something. Evaluation implies comparison with some standard. In other words, to judge it, you have to compare it to something. So what are you comparing it to? When we say that something is hard, it's because we're comparing it to something that's easier. Because compared to something harder, this doesn't look so bad. If we say that something is bright, well, it's compared to something that's a little dimmer, right? Or if we say that it's dim, it's compared to something brighter. So notice there's always a continuum. And what it is, whatever it is for you, could always be better. It could always be worse. I'll come right back to that when we get to the brain hack. So what's that other process? Notice this one. Your brain is constantly anticipating or guessing or predicting what is to be. And that doesn't exist yet because we haven't created it yet. So this next process is creation. And to create something, we have to first imagine it. This is where our powerful imagination comes in and can either work for us or against us. How are things going for you next week? You don't know, but you've got some predictions, don't you? Notice that you don't know. So whatever it is you're predicting is completely in your imagination. That's not good or bad. It just is what it is. So notice that you are constantly creating what is to be. First in your imagination, and then once you imagine it, it gives your brain a template to go out and create it. This is why it's so important to pay attention to whatever it is that we're imagining. So while we're on creation mode, just check this out for a minute. Notice what happens to your feelings. Because in the coaching and psychology world, we know that our feelings determine how we show up, what our actions are, and that's what creates our results. So I invite you for a moment to notice what your feelings are when you imagine or predict or expect that what's coming is even worse than what we've already got. How do we feel? Do you notice that? This, my friends, is anxiety. That's 30 years of clinical experience in a nutshell. Anxiety is when we imagine or predict or expect that what's coming is even worse than what we've already got. Notice that. Now let's go the other direction. How do you feel? Focus on the feelings. How do you feel when you imagine or predict or expect, because you don't know, so it's all imaginary, that what's coming is even better than what we've already got? How do you feel? That is hope, anticipation, eagerness, excitement. When you know that what's coming, and you don't know, but you're imagining, is even better than what you've already got. Notice that, because feelings matter, and it's our feelings that create or lead to our actions. It's our actions that create our results. Energy precedes outcome. Let me say that again. Energy precedes outcome. So if you want different outcomes, you start managing your energy primarily with your feelings. Let's do a little mental experiment. What if I gave you an assignment to just take that creative energy that you've got and any skills or resources available to you and then spend the next 15 minutes making your life worse? What a ridiculous assignment. Would you ever do that? On purpose, I mean. We do it accidentally all the time. But notice how quickly your brain came up with half a dozen ways to pull that off. And it wouldn't even take 15 minutes, would it? Notice this. Newsflash. You have the power to make a mess. Have you noticed already? Over 30 years of clinical experience, I've had people show up in my office so many times and they're like, "Oh, doc, I've got this huge mess." And I'm like, wow, impressive. I don't actually say that, but I think it sometimes. We have the ability to make a mess. I want you to notice this. You have the ability to make a mess. Now, this is good news. Now, what are we going to make? Well, that depends on some choices, doesn't it? It starts with our imagination. So in creation mode, remember these are the two modes, evaluation and creation. In fact, you know what? I'm going to give you a visual model to help you capture this. Just go to the URL on the screen right now, drpauljenkins.com/themodel. When you go to that URL, you will get a full color copy of the positivity model, the way I'm describing it here to you, with a little description of what the elements are. So go grab it, okay? drpauljenkins.com/themodel. You're welcome. Now, I promised you 2 hacks. So let's get to those brain hacks now that will help you to stay positive without slipping into denial. The first step is understanding what positivity is. I've given you a little sense of that already. Now, for each of those 2 modes that we talked about, remember there's evaluation mode, that's here at the bottom of your model, and creation mode here at the top. So a brain hack for each. Let's start with evaluation. This one is called the gratitude power-up. The gratitude power-up is that you make, for 5 days in a row, you make a list of 25 things for which you are sincerely grateful. Now, I don't want you to pretend you're grateful for it. You have to actually be grateful for it to put it on the list. Oh, and don't repeat anything on tomorrow's list that's on today's list. Whole new list every day. Okay, are you in for this? Here's the power up part. Most people, when they make a gratitude list, they do the wimpy kind. And what I mean is they list things that are obvious or that are easy to be grateful for, like health and family and sunshine and rainbows and puppies and indoor plumbing. Yeah, anybody can be grateful for that. That's the wimpy stuff. I want you to power it up. So to do that for each day, at least half of your list, that's 13 if you're doing the math, at least half of your list every day is about the hard stuff. The stuff that's difficult, painful, frustrating, annoying, kicking your trash a little. You got something? Yeah, everybody's got something. If you don't, we can get you something. But notice whatever is painful, difficult, or hard, and I want you to ask your marvelous mind, what am I grateful for in this? Now, it could be something like cancer. This is something we're dealing with right now in our family. My son has cancer. What is your cancer or whatever the hard thing is, right? I'm not saying be grateful for the cancer. I'm saying open it up. Okay, look inside of there. Rummage around, see what you can find for which you are sincerely grateful. Put that on your list. Well, what about cancer? You know what I found in there? I've been able to spend more quality time with my son in the last 2 months than in the last decade. Am I grateful for that? Yeah. Okay, am I grateful for the cancer? Well, that's a little harder, but that's where I found it. It was in there. The gratitude power up. 25 items a day. At least half of your list is about the hard stuff. Are you in? Okay, now here's the other hack. This has to do with creation. Remember, the good news is we can make. And yes, we can make a mess, but we can also make a masterpiece. And that depends on what we imagine or plan or put our mind to. So here's the creation hack. For the same 5 days, ask yourself, what can I do to make my life better by 8? Now look at your watch. What time is it? Is 8 o'clock coming? Uh-huh. Yeah, it comes every day, twice, if you don't get up early. Notice that things have to be either a little better or a little worse, or a lot better or a lot worse at 8. I don't think it can be exactly the same. At the very least, you're going to be a little older. You might be more hungry, more tired. I don't know. It depends on what you did just before 8. But ask your mind to tell you an idea. What could I do to make my life better by 8? And you can pick any aspect you want, your health, your finances, a relationship, and see what your brain does. I'm not talking next week, next month, next year, 8 o'clock. If you'll do this hack, better by 8, I call it BB8, for the same 5 days, you get to have 10 upgrades to your life. How does that feel? How awesome is that? Are you in? For the brain hacks, remember, I've got a visual model for you. Go to that URL I shared with you earlier, drpauljenkins.com/themodel. I'll put one of these in your inbox with a little description of what it is, and then you can get busy being positive without slipping into denial.